Okay, rather than have you look at me, I'm going to share my screen. But what I want to remind you is that I created well, first of all, TJ and Ashley are going to be on top of the chat. So if people have things to say, they'll be involved in that. At the same time, I set up a Padlet that had the slides I'm going to use for today. And if you have comments or questions, that's a place to put them. I'm going to be monitoring that during the talk. And if we don't get to talk about what you posted today, then hopefully we'll address it in some way or another in the future. All right, let's do it. So there we go. Okay, hoping you can all see that. Can any of you give me a thumbs up so I can, there we go. Okay. So there's a little link. If you downloaded the slides from today, that's where the Padlet link is. As always, we want to remind everybody of good Zoom etiquette. Raise your hand feature. I won't be addressing the raised hand feature, but if there's something urgent, TJ or Ashley can interrupt me and let me know. Okay, so before we start, I wanted to take some time just to acknowledge how hard everybody is working right now. We spend a lot of time in the schools, the ALN staff, and we know that this has been a really, really difficult year, in many ways, even more than last year. Everybody's really struggling. And we wanted you to know that we're with you in this. We're doing what we can, but it seemed inappropriate to start to talk about what we can be doing during COVID without first acknowledging that. And I also want to acknowledge that the kids are suffering. I've had some really interesting conversations with people lately, and I think it's going to be difficult for us to get back to anything resembling normal because children's experiences in terms of socialization and interaction has been really crazy over the last year and a half. I also think it's really hard for people who aren't teachers to understand what we're doing. And so again, I just want to acknowledge that and tell you that we're with you. I have a kindergarten, well, I have several kindergarten teachers who I really like. They're friends of mine. And one of them says this thing, kiss your brain when the children do something wonderful. And so I wanted to, in a similar spirit, say, you should all kiss your hearts, kiss your spirits, because it's been a very, very difficult beginning to the year. So I am one of those people who believes that chaos is an opportunity. And when people are looking for direction, there's an opportunity for us to do something with it. And so what I'm going to suggest in this very short talk are 4 very specific things that we might think about doing, because the pandemic has given us an opportunity to start to focus a bit, to take a particular approach to math instruction that we might have thought about in the long run, but now because of conditions, we can actually start to have this conversation as a reality. So these are the 4 things. You know, districts and committees and commissions have been talking about what do we need to do to fix math education and to have a measurable impact, right? So people added up a few years ago, now many years ago, to try to address what do we need. And, you know, one of the things that ALN is really focused on is the notion that we want to do what's pragmatic, what's doable, and we don't want to be all over the map. So these 4 pieces that I'm going to offer are meant to be brief. A couple of them are easier than others. I'm putting them out there as a way to start a dialogue about trying to focus math instruction and go in a concerted direction. I was telling my colleagues that I sent this list out to a couple of math educators I really respect, Marilyn Burns and Steve Leinwan. By the way, Steve Leinwan will be our keynote speaker at the November 11th gathering, and that's a really big deal. He's a wonderful speaker and a wonderful educator. Anyway, I sent it to Marilyn and Steve and said, what do you think about these? And they were right on board with it. So let's take a look at each of these. We want to focus on the most important concepts. We want to stop teaching the algorithm, and anyone that's ever heard me speak will not be surprised about that at all. We want to support special educators in content, and I want to start a dialogue about this notion of the idea of deficit thinking in mathematics. Okay, so what's most important? People take this on. This is one of the things that I think is fairly unique about the All Learners Network. Lots of districts have done some version of the power standards, right? So they want to take the 25 Common Core standards and they want to condense them into 10 or 12 Common Core standards. And what we've always believed is that it's really hard to have a mission, a really focused mission, when you have to look it up on a piece of paper, right? So if you really want to have a focused mission, you need to be able to, in the moment, pull it up. And that's where the high leverage concepts really came from, was this notion that what's the elevator speech about the most important elements of first and second grade mathematics? What will allow people to be, what will allow students to be most successful? Which is why we're such strong proponents of our HLCs. I think you could make an argument that it's the focus that needs to happen, but that knowing that there's one or two things, one or two areas that everybody's going to make sure kids have attended to is super important, whether you use our HLCs or whether you use something else. I think ours are really well done, and I think they're really helpful because they coordinate one to the other. It's not just one grade level figuring out what's most important at their grade level. So focus is really important. And the other question I get all the time, especially given the fact that I'm a statistics teacher, is what's so magic about algebra? I would make the argument, if I was talking to myself, which sometimes happens, I would make the argument that from a day-to-day point of view, statistics are really important and maybe even more important than algebra. But what we know about algebra is that it's the gateway. It's the single thing that closes opportunity gaps for children. This summer, the math community lost kind of a giant, a man named Robert Moses. If you don't know about Bob Moses and the Algebra Project, it is worth taking some time. Maybe sometime I'll do a whole talk about that. But he understood, as do many people, that understanding algebra and being successful in algebra means you're much more likely to graduate from high school and you're much more likely to go to college. And so while we can argue about the importance of a balanced math curriculum, I think it's kind of indisputable that algebra is the piece that we have to get kids to. One of the really interesting things for me about being a K-12 math coordinator at one point in my career was I could be in a calculus classroom at 8 o'clock and a kindergarten classroom at 10. And being able to see that what kindergarten teachers do actually creates access to algebra when kids are older. Everybody's got to do their part to get kids through to algebra, through high school, and on to career and work readiness. It's all important. And there we go. Okay, I will just spend a minute on this, but we got to stop teaching the algorithm. I know it's in the Common Core. And I know that people will post and say, what am I supposed to do? It's in the Common Core. That you have to negotiate with your school. I can't, I'm not the king of math. Wow, that would be an interesting thing to be. On the other hand, you do have some control over how much emphasis you put on things. Why stop teaching the algorithm? Because it's not useful. Honestly, it doesn't offer much in the way of furthering understanding. If kids have a choice of using the algorithm or doing something they understand, they're going to do something they understand, unless it's been drilled into them or suggested that the algorithm is somehow better. The real reason to stop teaching the algorithm from an ALN point of view is it causes misconceptions. You could eliminate a large number of misconceptions if you just stop teaching the algorithm, particularly the subtraction algorithm and the long division algorithm. There is just no reason to keep doing this, right? They're an anachronism. We created them before we had any kind of digital computation in order to do lots of calculations relatively quickly, automatically. And people were okay with not understanding what they're doing, just like they're okay with punching numbers into a calculator and knowing that the calculator is doing something and spitting an answer out, right? We don't know all the chip things that a calculator does, and we don't really know when we're little what the algorithm is doing most of the time. And before there's a bunch of people posting on the chat, I know that you have children in your classroom who know and use the algorithm. I got it, I'm there. That's not the kids we're talking about. If we're okay with 50% of our kids understanding the math they do, then you know what, go ahead and do the algorithm. But we are the all learners network, not the some learners network. And what we know from lots and lots of experience in the field is that you have to stop teaching the algorithm if you want everybody to be on board. The fractions, if there are fifth grade teachers here, I am begging you, pleading with you, please don't go anywhere near those algorithms with those kids in fifth grade. Because when they come to intervention in sixth grade and I have to work with them, I have to unravel their misconceptions that come from those algorithms. I know that it's really convenient to just multiply across the top and bottom of a fraction. The issue there is very few people are in their lives are handed a worksheet with multiplication of fractions on it and told to solve. And the issue with teaching the algorithms for multiplication and division, I know it's keep, change, flip, but I can never remember what the actual order is. Kids and teachers, by the way, do not really understand when they're supposed to multiply, when they're supposed to divide, or what those things mean. If you let go of the algorithms and at least wait until 7th or 8th grade for them, the conceptual understanding is going to increase significantly. Okay. Support special educators with content. So this is big. The first two, I would argue, having focus and stop teaching the algorithm, those are not that hard to do, honestly. This is a bigger and in many ways more important piece because special ed programs do not really prepare special educators with math content. My colleague Glenn Patterson and Erica Moy, colleagues, and I are really looking to unpack exactly what this whole condition looks like. But the reality is you get a K-12 certificate with one or a half a course in math methods or math content to be a special educator. Special educators are not expected to be experts in math. And up until now, I would say that's fine. They're expected to know what's going on with kids. But what we know more and more is that if they don't have good math content, then they're going to revert to things like the algorithm or to programs like touch math or things that are focused on memorization rather than on conceptual understanding. So across districts, across the state, we have to put an emphasis and an effort on getting more content, professional development for teachers in special education, for interventionists, for paras. Oh my God, we have got to get the paras who are working with these kids on a daily basis more content learning so that they can be more effective. There are direct links between teachers' content knowledge for teaching and the performance of their students. So we need a concerted and systemic effort to improve that. So all learners, we're putting out a series of things essentially geared to math-phobic people, math explorations. It'll be workshops and there'll be some online videos or whatever called Happy Math. But here in Vermont, we have great organizations to support content knowledge, right? There's the ongoing assessment project, OGAP, which is really focused on deep understanding of content knowledge, and VMI. If your district doesn't have VMI graduates, why doesn't your district have VMI graduates? It's a program that's available to teachers and will really help with that content understanding. Okay. And this last piece, this is my last slide. I wish, even though there's whatever there are 60 or 70 people in the room right now, I wish we could have a conversation about this. I think we really have to take a step back and let go of our love of categorizations. I know RTI and MTSS and TJ's version MLSS, multi-level systems of support. I understand their practicality, and they put us in a frame of mind that tends to look at kids as being in categories. And in my experience, they don't really come that way. I hope you're going to forgive me. I'm going to use an analogy here. I worried a little about using this analogy, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. When kids are getting toilet trained, we don't talk about the need for toilet training intervention. We don't have such a strict schedule. We haven't decided that every kid has to be toilet trained by the time they're 25 months old, right? We know that some of them are going to do it more easily than others or earlier than others, but almost every kid is not going to school. And I know there's exceptions, but by and large, not every kid's going to school with a diaper. They get there. They're in a variety of states of figuring all of that out. And so I think if we're going to get to this all learners piece, if we're going to make a significant change, we've got to start thinking about the way we think about our wide variety of learners. And some words that I would suggest, even though I'm going to give a workshop tomorrow on intervention, and I talk about intervention a lot, I love the idea of emerging understanding. I love the term I just heard Aaron Oliver and TJ use, unfinished learning. It's just so perfect to me. And of course, Joe Bowler's idea of not yet. So when I first started my career, I taught, well, early in my career, I taught in a non-graded public school, the primary program down in Westminster. And the kids came to us after kindergarten, and when they were ready to go to 5th grade, they went to 5th grade. So sometimes most times that was a 4-year journey. Sometimes it was a 5-year journey, and sometimes it was even a 3-year journey. But kids were where they were. So one of my sons had some learning challenges, some reading challenges when he was young. And we went to the open house, and they had all the papers up on the wall, samples of kids writing. And he was so embarrassed because it was obvious that his writing looked very different than the kids who were up on the board with him. He was very self-conscious about it. It was actually a problem. But if you had come to the primary program, you would have seen everything on that bulletin board, from a response to reading "It Was a God Book, I Licked It," and a drawing that was above it. Okay, so it was a good book, I liked it, just to be clear. And you would have seen stuff that was several pages of a reading log in response, right? There was in a non-graded setting, it was sort of irrelevant what a kid was supposed to be doing. And what was much more relevant was where they were and how we were going to meet their needs. And I think it's time for us to start having that conversation on a grander scale. We could start by thinking about, I know why people say my low kids and my high kids. I understand that. I'm sure I've said it too, hopefully not lately. But let's try to change as a group, as a society of educators. Let's try to start thinking about the fact that kids aren't low or high, they have different needs. Sometimes they need more intensive work, sometimes they just need more time. In the end, what's really called for here is that growth mindset idea of the power of inevitability. Kids are going to be able to do this. Everyone can do math. It's not just an aspiration, but it's a reality. And if we can hang on to not yet, then I think there's great opportunity in this time of chaos for us to start to change the way we think about this and to change the direction of our thinking. Okay, so I am looking at the Padlet. There's kind of a complicated question, which I would like to take on, but I don't want to do it when we only have a couple of minutes left. The whole idea of common denominator, I don't want to open a can of worms, but I just want to suggest that most children can repeat to you what a common denominator is supposed to be, but they don't really understand what it is, aside from a thing you do in order to add or subtract fractions. And I think there's better ways to conceptualize what common denominators are, including area models. We have an event coming up sometime in November with Fran Huntoon, where you can come and have some wine and have some hors d'oeuvres and talk fractions. And Fran goes very, very deep into this. First of all, I'm really glad you're all here. And secondly, our goal is always to have a conversation that continues. So if you have reactions to the ideas that are out here, especially these 4 ideas, send me or one of my colleagues an email and let's talk about it. It's my belief that these 4 opportunities exist for us right now. We take advantage of them, it could make a big difference for a lot of kids. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and turn this back to my colleagues.
TJ, do you want to go ahead and pull up the slides?
One last reminder, we do have a social media challenge going. So we have 4 $25 Amazon gift cards up for grabs, but you have some work to do. Also, if you want to check out any of our events, we have some that are available to attend virtually as well as simultaneously in our beautiful learning center in Burlington, Vermont. So I'll put that link in the chat as well.
So thank you so much for coming. Go ahead.